Addiction can hold a person in the grasp of things that they feel beyond their control. The addiction is one where frequently a person feels they need the approval of or something to get beyond. Listen to this podcast to learn how a person overcame a tight grip of addiction on his life. Hi there, and thank you for joining us on the Overcomers Overcoming podcast. We feature those who are in the process of overcoming or have overcome any type of life encounter, life obstacle that at the time seemed to be almost insurmountable. With this podcast, we have three objectives in mind. Our first objective is we want you to know with a confident resolve you are not alone. We want to work with you. We want you to know there are others who are working with you, who want to help you through whatever you are encountering, and together we will get through whatever you're experiencing.
Our second objective is there are multiple options for any life encounter you are facing. We want to help you develop a resolve that there are various options and solutions to any life dilemma.
Our third objective is to help you with critical thinking skills. If you're encountering something that was possibly a decision you made sometime in the past, and if you had the opportunity for a life redo, you would make a different decision. We want to help you with those critical thinking skills that can help you make an informed decision and not encounter what you're going through at the moment. We are the Cooper Culture, a veteran-owned business. We work with business personnel and families to develop and sustain connected relationship cultures within their families and organizations. That type organization is one where people feel wanted, appreciated, and genuinely a part of that organization. I'm with my wife and business partner, Marty, who has helped me facilitate this podcast. Today we feature Logan Hufford, who discusses with us his past of a very troubling addiction to sexual attractions, pornography, infidelity with his wife, and other associated factors that had some root in pornography, but it also had a root in association with the wrong friends, a need to be accepted by others. He is very candid in describing to us what the past used to be, but most importantly, what requirements, what decisions he had to make to turn away from the past. His wife was a very supportive person, but God was the one who helped him make the transformative decisions to lead a new life. Marty, what are some takeaways we can learn from Logan?
Ron, Logan's journey of overcoming adversity, transforming his life, and rebuilding his marriage was a powerful and deeply inspiring story.
It's a great opportunity for us to learn of others and not hold judgment, but to stand by and be willing to work with others. Let's listen and learn together. Logan, great to have you with us. Our listeners are going to be very interested in how you recovered from your background. You are an acknowledged previous sexual addict, and they're different things of your past that our listeners are very interested in learning how you overcame. And I'm going to tell you and our listeners up front that I am a believer that the past does not define you, but rather how you recovered from whatever it is in the past does define you. And so, Logan, our listeners are going to be very interested in knowing just kind of a 60,000-foot brief summary of what life used to be, with our emphasis on how did you recover? What was maybe your decision point to change your life? Logan, good to have you with us, partner.
I appreciate so much you guys having me on and the opportunity just to shed light on this.
Logan, can you give our listeners kind of that, quote, 60,000-foot view of what the past used to be, and we're going to emphasize what it was, the turning point to turn your life around.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'll put it this way. Maybe the best way I can start answering that question is my handle on Instagram, and kind of how I put myself out there in the public domain, talking about sexual addiction recovery, is no longer in bondage. And the reason for that is because I cherish the fact that I can say I'm no longer in bondage to sexual addiction, because I know what it is like to live for a lot of years as a dad, as a husband, as a man who I loved my wife. I loved my kids. I wanted desperately to be a good dad and a good husband, to be a good man. And I seemingly, that's a key word, seemingly, I seemingly couldn't stop cheating on my wife, pornography, this whole double life. I was a liar. I was a manipulator. Um, I lived in this space where as a young 20 something dad and husband, I mean, with 4 beautiful boys and an incredible wife who did everything she could to be the best wife possible. It got to the point where I hated the fact that my family had me. I hated the fact that I was a dad and a husband, not because of them, but I hated the fact that they had me for their dad, for their husband. And that's a really dark, terrible place to live. And that's where I lived for a lot of years. And I completely gave myself over to this idea that this is all I can be. I'm a cheater. I'm a liar. I'm an abuser. I can't be anything more than this. And to a large extent, the evidence backed that up. The evidence seemed to point that I was never going to be more than that. And by God's grace, all of that has completely been transformed, but it was not a quick and easy process. There was no toggle switch off.
Logan, as you think back on the way things used to be, would it be fair to say that you maybe had a low self-confidence? Were you seeking other people's approval? You were uncertain just where you fit best. You were uncertain your purpose. And I'm searching for the right words.
Yeah.
But I mean, does anything I say resonate with you?
Okay. Well, everything you said resonates, but for different reasons. The very first thing that you said, as you were kind of grappling for words, through the right terminology, the very first thing you said is probably the best way to describe my background, in terms of, some of the things that nothing made me an addict. And I clearly emphasize that. I didn't catch the disease of addiction. Life didn't make me an addict. I made myself an addict through a lot of unhealthy choices. But yeah, low self-esteem. I felt ugly. I felt like girls wouldn't like me when I was a kid. I felt like I would never be attractive to the opposite sex. And so, as an older teenager, as a young man, when I could start to get some sort of attention from other women, or at that point, just, other girls, right? As a teenager, when I started to get a taste of that, that was this high. And okay, I want more of that. I want more attention. I want more. And a lot of it, to the outside eye, would have seemed pretty normal. I'm a young guy learning how to talk to girls, and in trying to flirt with girls, but inside I was craving and feeding off of any attention that I could get, in the same way that somebody progressing through drug addiction or any other addiction that we think of as a more stereotypical addiction, I chased after more and more of a hit, more and more of a dopamine hit, more and more of a high. And with pornography, with attention from women, with all of this, I needed more. I needed different. I needed something darker. I whatever gave me that good feeling a year ago or 5 years ago, I needed more than that. And it progressed and progressed and progressed. But absolutely, one of the roots that I absolutely was trying to overcompensate for, one of those roots of my addiction, was my identity and me seeing myself as somebody who's unattractive, who people will not like, and trying to measure up to that.
You seem to be saying, in addition to being uncertain about yourself, maybe part of that is unlovable. Did you isolate yourself from your family to seek your addiction and so forth. And Logan, I'm asking you this because I want our listeners to know what some of the symptoms were, because I'm hearing you say, and I may be misinterpreting, certainly tell me, it seems you masked some of your insecurities, and we listeners want to be aware of things such as that. I'm not trying to suppose I know what your life was like. I'm just I'm trying to read into and process what you're saying.
Yeah, no, I mean you're very intuitively getting a pretty good grasp of what it looked like. And as like everything in life, as with everything in addiction, it evolved, right? It didn't look the exact same when I was 22 versus when I was 14, and so on and so forth. But masking, absolutely. I was constantly trying to find the right mask for the right occasion. And of course that would be a certain type of mask as a 15-year-old kid when I'm first struggling with pornography. As a 20-year-old, first, and now I'm engaged and get married, I'm a young husband. That's a different mask. As a dad, that's a different mask. At work, at church, right? Like all of these places, I'm trying to put on the right mask. And when I say that, like trying to put on the right mask, it would be inaccurate to try to convey like I was super intentionally crafting the perfect identity. It wasn't that. A lot of it was more subconscious. A lot of it was in a very unhealthy way, just intuitive, me trying to protect myself. I'm using air quotes, right? My addiction, trying to protect that part of me that I'm trying to overcompensate for. And it's defense mechanisms. And a lot of times you think about if you've ever, if you've talked to somebody who has struggled with addiction, people in recovery, read books about it, most often, like probably 95+% of the time, there are at minimum, there's been an acute, tragic or traumatic incident in that person's life. If not full on just, traumatic, abusive backgrounds growing up. Right. And I didn't have that. I did not have any of that, but there were still those things, that I was trying to compensate for. There were still those things that I was trying to make up for. And which just goes to show, I mean, that in this human experience, I don't need something obviously, tangibly tragic to push me to chase after addiction. We're humans. Every human has the potential to feel broken, right? Has the potential to feel empty, to feel less than. And I'm an example of that. I had all these things on the surface that would point to I shouldn't ever become an addict. I was loved, I was safe, I was taken care of, I had a good family upbringing, and yet I still went out and chased after these things.
As you think back on the way things used to be, can you define a turning point? And I understand that the turning, the transition, the transformation from what you used to be to who you are possibly occurred over several years. But can you think back to a beginning point? Was it a person, event, whatever it was that helped you to realize, hey, I need to I need a lifetime out, so to speak, and I need to do something different.
Yeah. I think about it like landmarks. If my life was this journey, in a desert, there's these landmarks, there's these pillars in the sand kind of things, so to speak, as time went on. And some of them were very obvious. Some of them were, especially looking back, right? Some of them are very obvious and they were life-changing. Some of them were a little bit smaller, maybe. But these various things, in terms of people, one of the biggest ones started out with my wife, Carrie, who in 2015, after several years of me cheating on her with other women, as well as with pornography, and all the lies and all this, and I would confess these things to her, which is the whole other side of the story, is I would like give her these staggered confessions, and I'm so sorry, I'll never do it again, and on some level I kind of meant that, but my behavior didn't back that up. And so she knew about these things. She knew that I had done these things. She's a young mom. She's in survival mode. She's trying to take care of kids. She's trying to you just figure out how to get through the day. So she had no idea how to respond, right? But finally in 2015, and I see this as God's grace, because she'd not been to therapy. She had not been through any formal training. But she stood up, and for the first time in our marriage, she gave me an ultimatum. And it was a very healthy ultimatum. It was a healthy show of boundaries. It was because she didn't say, Logan, you got to stop cheating on me. Like, obviously I should have, right? But as sad as it is, that's not setting a boundary, because she couldn't control that. What she did in 2015 was she said, Logan, if you don't get serious help and stop cheating on me, then I will leave. You will lose me and the boys. She knew that she couldn't control what I did, but she could control how she responded. And that's the essence of a boundary, right? And that scared me, because long ago, I had given up any hope of having a good life. Like, whatever that meant, I wasn't going to have it. You mentioned having a calling or my mission on earth. I wasn't having any of that. There was no way I was going to have any of that. But if I could try to keep my family around and try to be in the vicinity of my family, I was going to hold on to that, like as the one vestige of like a normal life. So the idea of her leaving, I was like, okay, well, I don't think there's hope, but I'll try. And so that was one landmark, her standing up to her abuser, me, and making that clear. Well, the next almost year was a wildly imperfect, very non-linear journey of seeking out resources, seeking out recovery groups, trying things, but really struggling and not getting a lot of traction. But in that time, and I'll circle back to this, because one thing I did do was I was seeking resources. I was seeking help, and I wasn't doing it perfectly. And some days were better than others, but I was seeking help. I believe this 100%. God honors that. If I seek wisdom, if I seek healthy infrastructure, if I seek mentors, I will find them. I believe that 100% of the time. If I seek those things, I will find them. And trying different recovery groups and different stuff and not really seeing any hope. I found some guys at some groups that had done things that I had done, which honestly, like, that was something that kind of surprised me, but it still didn't give me hope, because these guys really hadn't experienced any healing. They were like, one guy had a few months of sobriety, another guy had maybe a year, but there was no transformation. There was no long-term healing. And I'm not saying anything wrong about those guys. Like, it's good that they were at the group, but there was nobody that could say, hey, I've come out the other side. Well, in the winter of 2015, 2016, I met a man who'd come out the other side. And this man would go on to become my mentor, Rick, become my best friend outside of Carrie. He's a father figure to me. He's like a grandpa to my kids. And this man, Rick, before he was any of those things, God put him in my path as a man who would love me enough to be real with me, who would show enough love to not care if he hurt my feelings. And he was very clear with me. He's like, because he had his own story of sexual addiction. He was about my dad's age. And he's like, Logan, you need more than just a surfacey group. You need something that's going to like take over your life. It's going to be really hard. And so he talked to me about this mentorship program. And he said I had to do it. And it was the hardest thing I ever did. I think you need to do it too. And he would go on to walk me through this basically 2-year voluntary house arrest program. And he mentored me through that. And then there's a mentorship team of other guys. I got to meet over time about 20 guys. But I mean, even within the next few months, I got to meet about a dozen guys that had my struggle or some version of it with sexual addiction specifically. But these guys had experienced healing. 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years of healthy living. Most of them had restored marriages, not all, because obviously it takes two, but most of them had restored marriages. That boggled my mind. I did not think that those things were possible. And so those were the two people that were the big part of those, those landmarks, those milestones. But it was, and there's other versions of kind of other people and other experiences, but it was me experiencing people and events that were reminding me for the first time in my life, hey, you don't run the show. You've been trying to run the show for years, and this is where you're at. So you can't be running your recovery. You can't be running your show. You're going to submit a lot of freedoms and a lot of autonomy and to other people. And I was willing to do it to try and stop cheating, to try and get sober. Really, that was the only thing I was hoping for, was maybe I can just get some sobriety. And God gave me that, but he gave me a lot more than that. Transformative healing, thriving, being able to look at my boys and love them and mentor them and be a dad to them, knowing that I'm not perfect, but I'm authentic, that I don't have a secret life, that I don't have shame hiding in the closet that I'm not going to tell anyone about. I spent 25 years going through life with literally a book full of things that I would never tell anyone because there was too much shame. And
you seem to be, yeah, go ahead.
So, and it's interesting because one thing you said, and I'm not, this is not me countering what you said, but just kind of adding a little texture to it. You talked about, the past not defining, and I'm with you in the sense that, like, my past mistakes don't need to define my future, right? But the beautiful part is, through recovery, like, God has taken that and he's put this incredible spin on it where my past doesn't define me. But I thought the opposite of that was, like, if the wrong mindset is my past defines me, I thought the opposite of that was like, okay, I can have a good future that's disconnected from my past, maybe. And that's not how it works. This life that I lead, that my wife and I, because she entered recovery from sexual betrayal trauma, this life that we lead, it's 100% connected to our past. The way we raise our kids comes from a foundation of recovery, comes from a foundation of, hey, we know where we've been in life. We know the stuff we've been through. And so while our past has not defined us, our past, in a beautiful way that I never thought would have been possible, our past gives this incredible perspective. Because, like, for me personally, it's the best motivator I could ever have in life, because I go home and I see these 5 faces that remind me of what I have, that by my own choices I shouldn't, right? And it keeps me going. It doesn't make life easy, but it makes days easier because it puts it into perspective.
And I'll reword just a little bit of what I said about your past does not define you. Your past presented you the opportunity that you're acting on right now. And
Right.
the opportunity is you're benefiting others, and you can benefit others who may be experiencing or nearly or have a propensity to experience what you experienced in life. What I'm hearing you say, and if I'm processing correctly, you had a wife who was willing to stay with you, work with you, albeit set a border, ultimatum.
Yeah.
Hey, I'll stay with you as long as you purpose to, and get your life right. I'll reword, I'll put things in my own
Yeah.
terms. And
Yeah.
then you had the mentor who said, "Yep, been there where you were, or where you are. I'm willing to help you through this." And so it seems, Logan, through those two, you had wife, you had children that, hey, you may have said something to the effect, they deserve better, and I can work through this. I've got someone who believes in me. You've mentioned God several times. I'll tell you and our listeners, Marty and I are faith-based, and I know that can take on a lot of different meanings, but very briefly, Jesus Christ is our Lord and Savior. To him, we owe everything, and to him, that through our faith in him, in the working of the Holy Spirit in our lives, we can, should we choose to follow the wooing of the Holy Spirit, as Scripture calls it, we can overcome virtually anything. Logan, this is your story, and you've got a great story of recovery.
Well, I thank God every single night when I pray with my boys and I tuck them into bed. I mean, they're getting a little bit older now, but I still go through the same routine. They're 12, 11, 10, and 8. And I tuck them in and give them a little smooch, and I just pray with them. And I thank God for salvation. I thank God for recovery. I thank God for my family. And it's again, it goes back to that motivation, that because it's born in gratitude, right? And because I'm surrounded by all of these blessings that it's not like a theoretical, like, oh, maybe I don't deserve, like, no, I know I don't deserve by my own merit, right? By my own choices that I had made in the past. It's an honor to be able to, and I always, for my own sake, I always just try to, I try to think of it to tell God's story in my life, right? Because it is, I mean, he was there the entire time. When you hear, Carrie's testimony, she talks about it from her perspective, right? And it's God was there because there was a lot of years where, from a human perspective, she was all alone. There was nobody that knew the stuff that she was going through, nobody that knew how to help her. And yet she could see God's hand, throughout that time.
How can we develop the attribute of resilience? How can we learn how to bounce back? How can we adapt ourselves best to those who have experienced adversity, have experienced a bounce back through resilience, but yet need someone to walk beside them to perhaps regain their confidence? That is all a part of what we do in the Cooper culture by developing harmony at home, harmony in the workplace, harmony at church. Let's work together to create that type of harmony in bounce back resilience with people. Contact us at thecooperculture.com or Ron at thecooperculture.com or Marty, M-A-R-T-Y, at thecooperculture.com. Let's schedule a 30-minute complimentary session where we can collaborate with each other, get to know each other, and learn how we can work with you to help you develop a culture of harmony where together we work through any challenges, any life encounters we have. Would you consider yourself totally recovered from, certainly even as you are recalling the past, you know the past. I'm going to say in the context of your past does not define you. Your memory has not been expunged of what the past used to be. Of course, you can recall that, but do you sense you are totally transformed, reformed from the past, that what used to be a temptation no longer is? Or would you categorize yourself as having to continuously guard yourself against what used to be the past?
Yeah, very good question. And it's one that I'll try to be concise with my answer. I'll start by saying the same reason why I, introduced myself as, no longer in bondage. Those words were very carefully chosen. I carefully chose those words because they accurately describe where I'm at when it comes to sexual addiction. I'm no longer in bondage. But I would not use the words. I don't like words that are like hard past tense, like I am healed, or I have been, or I used to be this. And on one hand, I think we can get too caught up into verbiage, but verbiage also really matters, right? Words matter. And so I'll put it this way, like, yeah, I absolutely have to guard myself. I absolutely struggle with temptations, but they don't seem like they're going to. In the past, I would get tempted and it would be like, I just have to give in, because I've spent years building up muscle memory, both literally and also, mentally and spiritually, that I'm going to give in. And that 100% is not that way anymore. To give a very like kind of small, but really tangible example. So like I put a video out there on Instagram a few months ago where I'd come home from work to grab some lunch, and I was there for like an hour, and my wife and kids were out doing something. And this wasn't a totally unique scenario, but she's a stay-at-home mom, and so it doesn't happen all that often. But it struck me as like there was a time, in one sense, this was like an eternity ago, but it also was only a few years ago. There was a time where if I was home alone and she was gone, she was out doing stuff, I know what I'd be doing. 100%. I know what I would be doing. And it would almost feel automatic. It almost would feel like I didn't have a choice, even though I did have a choice, but it felt like I didn't. And so to be able to be home and let the dogs out and grab some lunch and, check my phone, do whatever, and not feel tempted, not feel like I'm on the edge of my seat. Oh gosh, I hope I don't do the wrong thing. Like if that puts it into perspective, it's been several years since I felt like that, where it's like, oh gosh, I hope I don't do the wrong thing. I hope I don't look at porn, or I hope I don't do this, that, and the other. So it's been a lot of progressive victory. I definitely am no longer in bondage to sexual sin. But yeah, I still have to be careful. And some of that is, okay, if certain boundaries and certain ways of interacting with the world, the movies that I watch, if these things have worked for me to help get me sober, then I probably might as well just keep sticking to these boundaries, right? There's certain movies I'm just never going to watch. It's not that if I watch that movie, I would go act out. I don't think that. But it's adding one more brick onto a wall that I don't need to be building. It's one more thing entering my mind. I just don't need that. And it, but at the same time, there has been a shift, and I know we're getting rambly here, but there was a time, the first few years of recovery, where my primary goal in any given situation was safety at all costs. I need to make sure that I don't act out. I need to make sure that I stay sober. I need to make sure that I'm not hurting people around me. And I think that was good. I needed to do that. So like I basically never talked to like women out when I was running errands. Like, unless I had to, I would not talk to women, like, just because my history, my MO, like, I needed like a cooling off period for a while. I didn't have Facebook. I didn't have any social media. There was a lot of things I was just like, no, I'm just going to just go cold turkey in a lot of things. Well, the last few years, I still want to be safe and I want to be healthy, but it wouldn't be accurate to say that safety is my number one goal at all costs. Because something that I'm doing right now, having a conversation, on a podcast, the work that I do on Instagram, those things absolutely expose me to triggers. They expose me to things that I don't have to sign up for that. Right. When I get on podcasts, I'm going to talk with somebody who live in who knows where, and I don't know them from Adam. Some of them are guys, some of them are women, but there absolutely could be something that could come up from that I would have to be careful of. And the safest thing would for me to just not do it. The safest thing would for me to not put out recovery content on Instagram, because there's a lot of temptations on Instagram. But, I've chosen to look at the situation and go, okay, I'm still going to be safe, but I'm willing to do battle with temptation as long as it's not going to take me down. And I've got a lot of accountability. I've got a lot of people that are checking in on me and checking me for red flags and stuff like that. And I'm thankful for that, because because I can say that I'm no longer in bondage to it. It's allowed me to go out into the world and do some work that does expose me to temptation sometimes, but I'm able to do it safely, if that makes sense.
It does. And now I want to ask you, let's maybe close out with this. And
Sure.
what I'm about to ask you may seem very unfair, but let's just suppose we have a listener who has never been exposed to, never been involved in what you're going through, but they have someone in their family, a friend or something, that they have developed enough trust, and this person has divulged. They are experiencing, they're involved in a lot of stuff that you've been through. And you described the one person who said, yep, I've recovered from, he became your mentor. But for maybe those of us who have not experienced what you have experienced, but yet we've developed a trusting relationship, can you help us with the person who, how do we work with a person who may be in bondage too, as everything you described, but I can't totally identify with that because I've never experienced that, but Logan, the friend I'm working with, I want you to know I will be your trusted counterpart, the accountability partner to help you through what you're through. Can you help us help the listener who may be engaged in a similar relationship?
Yeah, this is a really, really important topic because every single human on earth falls into this category. All of us know somebody that is going through a struggle that we don't know, or like that we haven't personally experienced, right? Whether it's addiction or not. So yeah, on one hand, I will share one of the things that I look back on in my past, and I'm so thankful for it, is what I used to meet with a pastor at a church that I used to attend. And this guy, I mean, he's still a good friend of mine. He's an incredible pastor, incredible man of God. And this man, when I first had confessed things, I hadn't started like really reaching out to groups and stuff, but I confessed to Carrie, and she was like, "Can you please talk to Pastor Steamer?" And so I talked to him, and he met with me for a while, and I was totally not 100% honest with him. I tried to manipulate, and I give him these half truths and stuff. But in that time of meeting with him, he would listen to me share. He tried to be my accountability partner. He tried to ask me good, insightful questions, and all, as well as biblical counseling. But at one point, I remember he told me, and this has always stuck with me. He's like, "Logan, I love you and I want to help you. But I don't know the level that you struggle. I don't know that. I can't identify with that." And I'm really thankful that he was willing to say that, because there's a lot of pastors, there's a lot of mentor type folks that take on the idea of, well, if I love this person, I need to try to be everything for them. And that's just not the case. If somebody struggles with heroin addiction, can I give them good advice? Can I be a loving part of their infrastructure? Yeah. But I shouldn't try to be their primary accountability partner, more than likely. Now, until they find somebody, am I willing to try and help? Absolutely. But ultimately, they probably should work with somebody who understands substance addiction personally, if not literal heroin addiction, right? So I would say, just for anyone who's a loved one, yes, pray for that person. Be willing to give them tough feedback. Be willing to love them enough to be real. Love them enough to not be concerned about hurting their feelings. But don't try to be their everything. Encourage them to seek ideal resources. But there's a place in their infrastructure that you can take a role. My mom, my siblings, when I was going through the darkest times of my life, they filled a role. I always knew my mom was praying for me, that she was praying for God to break me. Now, she was not, and never will be, my accountability partner. That's not her role. But I knew where her role was then. I know where her role is now. She's part of my healthy infrastructure. And the accountability partner, I will, and it should be somebody who has been through some version of what I struggle with. I do very much believe that. And like I alluded to with my little, with my analogy of like somebody struggling with heroin addiction, I do think it's ideal that somebody they've got a pretty good sense of what the other person is going through. It doesn't have to be exact. My mentor had decades of pornography addiction. He never physically was with another woman. Whereas I had, my addiction, I went everywhere. But he still understood the sexual addiction. He understood me choosing wrong, painful, destructive choices over and over again, even though I had a good wife. So like he had been through my struggle, even though he hadn't been through everything I'd been through. It doesn't have to be exactly the same story, but there does need to be somebody who's been through a lot of it. I do believe that.
Well, Logan, I want to thank you on behalf of our listeners for sharing. Thank you and congratulations for being on the good side. You're free of that bondage. You can look back and know the way things used to be. You credit God and working through men, mentors, people to bring you through it. A credit to your wife of being willing to stay with you, your children. And congratulations on being a recovering person and transformed. And thank you for sharing with our listeners, because I feel very certain there are many of our listeners who may be experiencing what you have experienced, and you can help our listeners overcome. There's always hope.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Logan.
We appreciate having the opportunity to share our and our guests' life experiences with you.
The Cooper culture advances organizations to achieve and sustain high retention rates, connected communication, and trust through personality insights and principled leadership. You can contact us at our website, thecooperculture.com, and you can contact us directly at ron@thecooperculture.com or Marty, Marty, at thecooperculture.com. We work with you to help assess aspects of your culture to advance the environment and people to their best performance. We do that through our staff of certified personal performance coaches, leadership trainers, keynote speakers, and DISC personality behavior experts. You can book a speaking engagement directly through our website by contacting us at ron@thecooperculture.com. We look forward to sharing our life experiences with you, some of which are profound, some of which are pretty funny. Some of those life experiences are ones we'll never do that again because we've been through stuff. We truly look forward to working with you, speaking with you, helping advance you in any way that we can.